Hello, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Brotherly Love in the District. Tristan here, along with Jacob. A little bit of scheduling conflicts made it a little bit hard the past couple of weeks, but hopefully going to be getting back on track here for the future. Jacob's going to go ahead and tell you guys what we're going to get into today.
Yeah, so this week we're going to be doing our Super Bowl preview. We're going to talk about the conference championships and obviously what we think of the big game. That is going to be a week from today, actually. And then going on to the NHL, the last we spoke, it was before the All-Star break. So both teams have played some games. We're going to talk about that, the All-Star break, and talk about a few re-signings and a big trade. So let's get right into it.
Yeah, so we'll start off with conference championships. And I think the big consensus was 49ers Bengals, and neither of those teams won. Obviously, well, let's go over the Chiefs Bengals game first, just because that one is the one that we probably have less information on. For one, I don't think the refs played as big of a role in the game as everyone makes it seem like they did. Like, I know a big call is that Joe Burrow not roughing the passer, the intentional grounding call, which if you go back and look at it, you can see that the nearest receiver is like 7 to 10 yards away from the ball. It was nowhere even close to a receiver. He was under pressure and he didn't get it past the line of scrimmage. It was a textbook intentional grounding. There is no way. And they were saying, oh, well, Patrick Mahomes did the same thing and it wasn't intentional grounding. Patrick Mahomes' arm got hit when he threw that ball. And also, you know who was the person who hit his arm with that, hit his arm on that pass? Joseph Osai, who committed the penalty later in the game to ultimately lose them the game. But I think the refs, I don't think the refs played as big of a role as everyone says they did. Obviously, officiating is something that comes into play altogether in any game, but I don't think it was as bad in either of the games as either losing team made it seem.
I mean, I don't think it was as bad as everyone made it out to be, but there's some bad calls. Like that 3rd and 9 where they just blew it dead for no reason.
That wasn't no, okay, so I don't remember the exact reason why they blew it dead, but the ref was coming in from up top of the field, and it's not wrong. It wasn't, they did what they needed to do in giving them that down back. And everyone says, oh, that 3rd and 9, like, that was such a blown call. First off, they blew the play dead. Who knows who stopped playing in between the ref blowing the whistle and Pat Mahomes snapping the ball and playing? Because he was the only ref that was blowing the whistle. Secondly, once they got that down back, they went out and Patrick Mahomes took a 5-yard sack, which ultimately worked out better for the Bengals than it would have if they left it. So that I mean, I get that argument, but the league, when you blow a play dead before the play even happens, you can't say nothing's going to happen. It was, the ref probably should have made more of an effort. Yes, because he was coming in all the way from like down the field. So he should have made more of an effort. But again, that play ultimately meant nothing because when he came back out, he got sacked. So there were some things wrong before the play, but I don't think giving the play back was an issue. That was definitely the right call by the officiating crew.
I just think it was a little questionable, but in the end, it didn't really matter. But in this game, I think one of the big reasons the Bengals lost is they just could not run the ball at all. I think for me, that's the biggest reason why they lost. All day, I think, considering how good the Chiefs offense is, the Bengals defense did enough. And I just think when it came down to it, the Bengals couldn't establish that run game. And for me, that's one of the bigger reasons why they lost. And then obviously, would the kicker have made it if Osai did not push Mahomes out of bounds?
It was a 45-yarder, I think, with the penalty. So it would have been a 60-yarder. Granted, for a lot of NFL kickers, for the most part, possible, they're going to make that. But north of 60 is when you're starting to get a little bit iffy. But any like 60, he's probably going to make that. Especially Harrison Butker is no pushover when kicking. He's a good kicker. He's definitely up there in the league. But I think obviously that Joseph Osai penalty was huge for the team.
Yeah.
And you were saying the big reason they lost was because they couldn't get the run game going. Another thing was as as soon as Joe Burrow snapped the ball, he was under pressure.
Yeah,
Like
their
that
offensive
Chiefs
line
D
sucked.
line was getting after the Bengals offensive line. So Joe Burrow had no time in the pocket. As soon as he snapped it, he had to get rid of it. And
Yeah. Yeah, Chris
you
Jones had a huge game.
Chris Jones, not like he wasn't a big time player coming out of college, but he definitely looks a lot better. When he was coming into the draft, I had no idea who he was. I didn't know who he was until a couple years after he got drafted, but he is a really good D tackle. He's a good piece for the future for them. Uh, Kind of an under the radar guy too. I didn't notice like this year he had 15 sacks, which I believe was the most amongst D tackles. So
Yeah.
he had a pretty decent year, and in my opinion, it was under the radar. But I think that's mostly because D tackles don't really get the respect that they deserve because they're in the middle of the D line. No one really looks at them except for like Dexter Lawrence and Aaron Donald, because Aaron Donald lines up all over
But
the
even
place.
those guys, they'll sometimes switch to the edge.
Yeah, that
They're
Aaron Donald
they're
lines
more
up all
combo
over the place.
players than true defensive tackles.
So, like I said, Chiefs D line was getting after Joe Burrow the entire game, made life hell for him back there, and I think that was a big reason why they lost. I don't think the refs played as big of a factor in it as much as everyone did. Like I said, that blown call where where they gave him the down back, it was right in the officiating standpoint. I don't see why people are complaining because, like I said, it was a sack. Uh, the roughing the passer, that's another one I wanted to talk about was the missed roughing the passer. That is the only one where I think they might have actually missed it. Have you seen the clip where Frank
Yeah.
Clark comes through the line? Now, here's my take on it. I think should it have been a roughing the passer call? Maybe. Did it Frank Clark come in really late? Absolutely. But it kind of looks like he just went in and just kind of slapped him on the chest, and it looked like Joe Burrow might have taken a little bit of a flop. So I can't really you can't really tell from the angle that it was at from
Yeah.
behind Joe Burrow, but from what I see, it kind of looked like it may have been a flop, and it looked like Frank Clark just gave him a nice tap on the chest. But I mean, that's neither here nor there. That
With
game's over.
roughing the passer, for me, it's difficult nowadays because we've seen worse roughing the passer plays get called, and I think that call is so difficult to call nowadays. I think like the rules need to be nailed down. Because I think I I agree with I agree that it shouldn't have been a roughing the passer, but if you look at the history, especially this year in the league, um, very similar plays have been called. So maybe I think that's one of the reasons why people hate that call so much. Understand where the refs are coming from, but if you're looking at it through a consistency standpoint, there are some questions that need to be asked.
And consistency is a big piece of it. I mean, the catch, obviously the catch was a big issue for years upon years. They
Yep.
never really had a staple as to what a catch was in the NFL.
Mhm.
And once they determined, I think ultimately the rules for a catch have been pretty deemed pretty well now. They're usually pretty clear on what a catch is, and they're sticking with it too. Like that Hunter Henry catch on Thanksgiving against the Vikings, they say if you don't survive the ground and the ball pops out, then it's not a catch. Hunter Henry, he had it. The ball popped out when he hit the ground. Granted, it didn't touch the ground, but it still popped out, and that's the consistency that they need to have. So if they can figure that out with the roughing the passer, then I think it'll be better than what it is at now. I mean, trying to find that happy medium for everyone though is a hard point. But like I said, when they found that medium for the pass, and now that they have set what a catch is, you don't hear as much complaining about it. That Hunter Henry
Yeah.
catch was the only complaining I've heard about an NFL catch in a couple years now. But
They did nail down the rules. But you go back a few years ago, there was the Dez catch, the Jesse James catch. There was so many different
well,
non-catches and catches, and I think that was one of the biggest problems people had with the league at that point. But the league was able to nail that down. I think they need to do that with roughing the passer because I do think they're protecting quarterbacks a little too much. I understand like the word about the concussion things, but some of the roughing the passer calls have been utterly ridiculous. It's like, what do you want them to do?
Yeah,
Just two
exactly.
and touch them. So I do think that's the next big thing I think the league needs to address.
It's football. And speaking of the nailing down the roughing the passer rules, have you seen they're going into a meeting to talk about the hip drop tackles?
Yeah, I have.
Which again, I mean, they're kind of taking away the physicality of football. It
Yeah.
If you have, especially Derrick Henry, like just for example, if you are Derrick Henry most of the time, after you get past the first level, you're going to be the biggest person on the field. The
Yep.
odds of a 190-pound quarterback coming in and being able to tackle you without dropping his hips and bringing his entire weight down are slim to none. That's going to make Derrick Henry unstoppable. They're taking out the physicality of the game. Hip drop tackles, yes, they're not the safest, but at the same time, you're playing a game where you know the risks, you know you're going to get tackled, you know you can get injured. There's just some things that I think you can't take away, and hip drop tackles, that's one of them. The roughing the passer, I mean, the fact that they're saying you can't drop your weight on the quarterback. How you're supposed to pick him up, lay him down, give him a pillow, give him a blanket, like there's just
Kiss him
some things
goodnight, tuck him in.
there's some things that you can't change and you need to leave in the sport. Hip drop tackles being one of them.
Yeah, and if they were to get rid of hip drop tackles, I think that would do a lot worse because you would maybe see a less ankle injuries, but you'd see a lot more head collisions and head injuries because that these safeties are going to be trying to go for the chest. They're going to have to lead with their shoulders and head more because they cannot wrap around the legs and drop. They're going to have to go more for the upper body, and you're going to get hit in the head more. I do not think it's the right decision to get rid of drop tackles, and I think it'll be a big mistake if the league does it.
Or on top of that, you saw what Derwin James did to Travis Kelsey, where he came up behind him and picked him up and threw him over his shoulder because he doesn't.
Yeah,
He had no.
he
If
did a
he,
mat
yeah,
return.
there's gonna get more of those tackles in the NFL. So there's some things that you can't take away from the game. Hip drop tackles being one of them. I mean, there's just.
Yeah,
And earlier, I wasn't trying to say roughing the passer needs to be taken out of the game because that
yeah,
needs to
no,
stay. But what I was saying is
yeah,
like some of the physical tackles that they're saying is roughing the passer needs to be taken out.
yeah, yeah, because there's really been some utterly ridiculous calls that are clearly for for the offense, and I, one of my big problems with the league nowadays is all of the rules are conducive towards the offense, and I think that just needs to be leveled out more. Like, I don't think we need 70s defense back when you see like Mel Blunt like clotheslining people when he's playing cornerback. I'm not saying that, but I think they need to get back to a point where it's not so one-sided in terms of rules and calling.
Well, high scoring brings in the money, and ultimately, we know that's what
Yeah,
The NFL is a business. They want the money, so higher scores, more views. That is big for them. So they have to find the happy medium there for everyone. Uh, but Chiefs win that, advance to the Super Bowl. They were done with the Burrowhead comments and all the trash that Cincinnati was talking. So, but I mean, you look at it, the AFC for the next 10 years is going to be every year is going to be Mahomes, Burrow, Josh Allen. One of those three are probably going to be in the AFC Championship for the next 10 years, no doubt.
yep.
And then you throw in Trevor Lawrence looked good this season. He looks like he's growing under Doug Peterson. Justin Herbert, Lamar if he signs back there in Baltimore. You got a lot of young talented quarterbacks in the AFC. See how Kenny Pickett comes along in the next few years. So there's going to be a lot of competition in the AFC, especially with all those young guys. Uh, so I don't think Burrow is, any further removed from his ability to win a Super Bowl, not winning it this year. I think he'll have a pretty bright future for the next couple of years, especially after. I'm interested to see how his contract works out because they're going to have to re-sign him this offseason, like the Eagles are going to have to do with Jalen Hurts, and he's going to get it. He's going to get a bag, that is for sure. But I want to see how he structures it. I feel like he's the type of player to be like Tom Brady and try to structure his contract in a way that he can still have other players around him because they're gonna have to re-sign. They're gonna have to re-sign T. Higgins soon. Jamar Chase is gonna need a contract in a year or two. Tyler Boyd, obviously, he's a huge piece. Joe Mixon, they need an offensive.
Are you sure about Joe Mixon, bro?
We'll see about that. But they obviously are going to need an offensive line if Joe Burrow is going to survive back there. Like they definitely are going to have some. I'm interested to see what Joe Burrow is going to do with his contract and how they're going to work that, because he's definitely he's probably going to be the quarterback to reset the market. And
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Him and Lamar are really gonna change that.
I'm interested to see who gets signed first, because
Yeah, because I think the other one is gonna try and use that as leverage for their own contract. Well, this guy got this, so I want something similar.
yeah, exactly. So I'm interested to see who signs first, what agent kind of holds off. But if Lamar gets a franchise tag, like there's also talk, then that kind of eliminates Lamar even affecting Joe Burrow's contract. So that's a huge piece. And Deshaun Watson ultimately screwed up the entire QB contract situation too. But going on to the Eagles 49ers game. Now, Eagles won an ugly game here. I'll be the first to admit it. They got, I don't want to say bailed, because even if Brock Purdy was starting and he did finish the game, I think the Eagles are still winning that game. But when Brock Purdy got hurt and the offense was only on the field for 3 plays at a time and the defense kept on coming out, that's ultimately what killed him. And you saw it.
The defense got psyched out. They weren't able to do anything. And if you look at the offensive stats for the Eagles, they only had 269 yards total. That's not really that impressive. But when you look at the score and you look at the context of the game, you could see that it wasn't close at all. The Eagles were just able to shut them down. But I mean, the 49ers defense were really shooting themselves in the foot. They had a roughing the punter call. They had some passing interference.
Every single time they made a stop, they were going to get off the field, there was a penalty. And again, that wasn't the refs helping the Eagles. There was not one, and I mean, you can say I sound biased all you want for me saying this, but as a genuine NFL fan, looking at all those calls, there was not one of those where I was like, oh, that shouldn't have been called. Because even though I am an Eagles fan, I'll take those calls, but if I look at it and I don't think it should have been called, then I'll say it shouldn't have been called. So
yeah, there's been plays like that.
Even that roughing the kicker call, that is probably the only one where I'm like, that one may have been iffy, because he hit
he got pushed.
So the difference between a roughing the punter and a hitting the kicker, or it's
whatever the other one.
Yeah, called. There's 2 different ones, but one's a 5-yard penalty and one is a 15 unnecessary roughness automatic first down. So there was a huge difference, because I believe that was a 4th and 6. So it still would have been 4th down. Eagles probably would have punted, but that's the only one where I was like iffy, because he didn't hit the plant leg. The plant leg is the roughing the kicker. That is the 15-yard penalty. The just hitting the kicker is a 5-yard penalty, and that's if you hit the leg that's up in the air. So, but he hit the leg that was in the air, his kicking leg, but the way he hit it pushed the punter and kind of like knocked him out, knocked his balance off. So, I mean, I could see it going either way, but I definitely see where that one was kind of a bit of an iffy call. But again, either way, all the other calls, the defensive holdings, the pass interferences, like they were legit. There wasn't anything where I was like, yo, that definitely should not have been called.
The only other thing I think that the refs kind of messed up was that Devontae Smith catch, and I think the Eagles even knew it as well. That's why you saw them rush to the line.
That's why Devontae Smith was doing this.
Yeah, and I think Shanahan just didn't have the time to really look at it as much as he probably wanted to, and he just thought, I'm going to eat in the shorts, or he didn't realize something. That's the only other thing I think the refs really got.
That's again, like, that's not even, that's more a kudos to the Eagles, because every team has that hurry up, like, I didn't catch that or I don't know if I caught that sign saying like get the ball snapped as quick as possible. That's more of a bad call on Shanahan and the 49ers. Now, every single one of those big plays is reviewed. I'm sure that play was being reviewed upstairs, but I don't know why or how, but they said on the broadcast that they didn't get the angle that the Eagles had, or that they got after we scored, saying that where you saw the ball clearly come out. And there's a specific time. So Shanahan, while he's down on the sideline, while the Eagles are rushing to the ball, there is someone on the 49ers looking at those angles and saying, hey, like, you need to review that. I don't think he caught that, and that's where the challenge flag comes in. Like you said, I don't think the Eagles gave him enough time for whoever was upstairs for the 49ers to get all the angles to see it. So, again, I don't really think it was a referee blown call. It was obviously a hard call to make because of the way that the only way you really saw it was from the inside and the ref was on the outside. It was just a hard call to make on the spot, and the Eagles did a good job of getting to the line, getting the ball snapped, and just keeping on going. So, again, I wouldn't really say that's a ref botch call. That's a football play right there, in my personal opinion. If it was going against me, would I be a little bit more angry about it? Yes, but at the same time, I would probably see it the same way, saying you can't really do anything about it. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, Brock Purdy going down ultimately hurts the 49ers a ton because Josh Johnson, obviously not an NFL starting quarterback. I know you have your PTSD from him and just love to hear that name.
From the 2 games he started, he actually won one. But when I saw him coming into the game, I'm like, oh, they're going to lose.
I didn't even know he was still in the league.
I didn't either. And when I saw that, I legit laughed out loud. Like,
but yeah, I mean, the defense, despite having no quarterback, they still had the number 1 defense in the league, and their defense held strong for just under the first half, and then they got too tired, and that's you could see the power and the ball control that the Eagles had take a toll on the 49ers defense.
Yeah, because their offense wasn't doing them any favors. They were doing a lot of 3-and-outs, and no matter how good your defense is, if your offense can't put together some long drives or help you out, you're not going to win.
There was one good drive they had where they scored. Yeah. Other than that, it was
had that incredible touchdown.
And again, they were shooting themselves in the foot on offense too, because I remember too, I believe they were back-to-back drives where they would get the ball, they would make a good play, and then there'd be a penalty that'd bring them back, and then they couldn't get 15 yards for a first down. So there was twice, and like I said, I believe they were back-to-back where that happened. So they definitely shot themselves in the foot with penalties in that game. And then you saw
left a lot to be
you saw later in the game, just as the game went on, the discipline and the anger started to set in. You saw Greenlaw just taking rocky shots at Kenneth Gainwell.
Yeah, and you saw Trent Williams just toss somebody to the side. But speaking of Rocky, the single reason why the 49ers lost is because they touched the Rocky statue. Don't touch the effing Rocky statue.
Did you see Travis Kelce come on and say,
he's like, don't
touch the Rocky statue, and definitely don't put an 87 jersey on it.
I did see that.
Hey, I mean, if that's how they want to take their downfall, I'm okay with it.
Don't touch the effing Rocky statue.
Did you see George Kittle's interview after the game where they asked him, how does it feel? You couldn't really hear the reporter, but he goes, how does it feel to lose because I don't have a quarterback? Yeah, it feels pretty crappy, for lack of a better term. But he wasn't happy. He was definitely angry that the quarterbacks all went down. And in my personal opinion, this is just me, again, speaking at it from home. But if I'm Brock Purdy, I don't care how much that arm is hurting. You're in the NFC Championship. You're trying to throw that ball. And whether it's dink and dunks or whatever.
Wasn't it his it wasn't his throwing hand, it was like the controlling hand?
No, it was his throwing hand. Because when he threw the ball, Hassan Reddick hit it when it was coming back. So it was kind of like he had all this momentum going forward, and Hassan Reddick just stopped it suddenly and pushed it back.
Yeah, in that case, I think I'd try and do everything I can to stay on the field because, I mean, one thing, the momentum for the team. You immediately saw that. I think the energy came out of the team the minute he went off
down,
the field.
Yeah.
You could feel it. You could see it. The defense, they were just prolonging the inevitable at that point, and the offense, outside of McCaffrey, who had a nice drive, they couldn't do anything.
Yeah, and McCaffrey, I mean, he had a huge game because they couldn't do anything else. You started to see Shanahan pull tricks out of the bag as they didn't want to run the ball with McCaffrey the entire game, but they had nothing else to do. It was definitely rough. If I were a 49ers fan, I would not be happy. I would definitely be a little bit angry at that loss, but There's nothing you could do. That's what you get for touching the Rocky statue. Philadelphia, bad luck.
Yeah, that's just something you do not do.
But Eagles then advance to the Super Bowl, and we get a Kelsey Brothers Super Bowl, which
Hmm.
I think, honestly, I'm happier that the Chiefs won than the Bengals. I believe the Eagles have a better chance to beat the Chiefs. So, I mean, this is going to be our Super Bowl preview. I see your face. You don't.
Really? I
Here's my reasoning. For one, just going off the top of my head, just trying to think real quick, I think the Bengals might have the best wide receiver core in the NFL.
I'd agree with that.
So for one, that's hard to cover in itself. Don't get me wrong, Eagles secondary is really good. Darius Slay, James Bradbury having amazing seasons, and they have Avonte Maddox back. That's huge. But I believe the Bengals have one of the best receiving cores in the league. Obviously, Joe Burrow is a top 3 quarterback in the league. He has such good poise in big games. He is another big piece of that. Their offensive line, obviously a huge weak spot. I think
Awful.
the Eagles defensive line would have feasted on them, but then again, their defense, their linebackers solid, nothing spectacular, but they're solid. Their defensive line, Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson, both really good pass rushers. Uh, and then their secondary, while it might not be the best players in the league, they work well together. Jesse Bates is a top 3 safety in the league, that's for sure. But Von Bell is another good safety across from him. And then their corners, again, not great, but as a unit in the secondary, they work well. And Mike Hilton is just a dog in the backfield. Do you watch the Pat McAfee show at all?
Yeah, sometimes.
They interviewed Lou Amarillo, the defensive coordinator for the Bengals, and he was saying how Mike Hilton, their slot corner, is just so good at disguising rushes and blitzes that he can be 16 yards off the ball and still get into the backfield when you're trying to as the quarterback is passing. So he just has a knack for being able to be somewhere else on the field and still get to the quarterback. At one play, Lou Amarillo goes, yeah, I asked him, where did you come from? The next county over? Like, just because he's so far away, but he still gets in. As a DB, usually you want to kind of be creeping up to the line as the ball is being snapped, but he can line up, he cannot show blitz and still get back there and cause trouble for the quarterback. So the Bengals, I believe, as a whole, are a better team overall than the Chiefs. And they also had the whole they had a little bit of swag to them in the playoffs this season. They had the whole Burrow head going. Uh, Joe Burrow just had that team kind of on a cloud 9. They had the whole thing where they were already selling tickets for the Bills Chiefs championship game, and they're like, well, let's not even, you better start sending those refunds.
Yeah.
Like, they had a whole thing of everyone's writing us off. Let's show them why we shouldn't be written off. And I believe the Bengals just had a better moxie going into the game, and I think the Bengals would have had a way better chance to beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl.
Um, I I disagree with that, and here's why. I think if the Bengals made it, I personally think it would have played similar to last year's Super Bowl, where the death of the Bengals comes in their offensive line. Because yes, they have good running backs, they have a good wide receiver core. I mean, but we saw it against the Chiefs. If a team with a good pass rush and good defensive line is able to get penetration, which they are quite easily, the Bengals they struggle. And I think both their defenses, I'd say they're pretty equal. I think the Chiefs have better linebackers, but I prefer the Chiefs' defensive line. I think they're pretty similar, but in terms of matchups, I think the Chiefs is worse for you guys than the Bengals. Because I just think the Bengals, I think it's a bad matchup for them, considering you guys have the most sacks since the '80s Bears, and I just don't think that would play out well. And considering the fact that they wouldn't have Joe Mixon, that would play a big part because I like P. Ryan. He's a good pass catching running back, but he's not the best runner.
He's not a number one back.
No, no, he's a great second guy, but he's not the number one guy. But with the Chiefs, they have the experience in Andy Reid. They have Mahomes. They're they have their wide receiver core isn't as good when they had obviously Tyreek Hill, but they have Scandling, they have Juju Smith-Schuster. With their running backs, they have Isaac Pacheco. They still have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. If he like
He did just come off of
yeah,
injury. I don't know if he's
yeah,
playing.
so they're gonna may have him back. So I personally think that the Chiefs are going to be a more difficult matchup for the Eagles. I think it's going to be a very close game, but looking how guys have looked throughout the playoffs and looking at this objectively, I think you guys are going to win.
So for one, the entire Chiefs wide receiver room is injured. Actually, before I do that, I want to go back to the Bengals thing real quick. I'm not saying the Eagles wouldn't have been able to beat the Bengals because I believe they still had a chance because, like you said, the defensive line, insane plus for the Eagles over that team over that offensive line for the Bengals. So I'm not saying that they wouldn't have been able to beat them, but I do think as a team, just a whole unit, I believe the Bengals are better. But I think either way, the Eagles have a good chance to win. Now, going over the Chiefs, there are only 3 players that I am scared of on this team. There are only 3 positions where I think the Chiefs are better than the Eagles. Do you want to take a guess for what those 3 positions are?
Well, I know it's quarterback, tight end, and linebackers.
No. The three that I have are obviously quarterback. Pat Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. He will probably go down as the best quarterback in NFL history, whether he touches Tom Brady's numbers or not. The way that he extends plays and moves his way around the field and can just make plays, he has a knack for that. In my book, he will probably go down as the best quarterback in the league. Tom Brady numbers or not, doesn't matter. Secondly, Travis Kelce, obviously, he is a dog. He is really good. Him and Pat Mahomes have some sort of different chemistry that no other tandem in the league has. Kind of like a Tom Brady Gronk tandem chemistry going. So those two just have it down pat. Now, the third position that I think the Chiefs have an advantage on is Chris Jones. I believe Chris Jones is better than any D tackle that the Eagles have, but I think that the Eagles D tackle rotation is better than the Chiefs D tackle rotation. So I think everywhere else on the field, the Eagles are at least a little bit better than the Chiefs on everything. Secondary, by far. Linebackers, I don't know too much about the Chiefs linebackers, so I'm not going to go too far, but I know the way that the Eagles linebackers have been playing this season, and they've been good. Like I said, D-line, best in the league, one of the best in the league. Offensive line, miles better. Running back, I think running back is probably a little more even than I think it is. But I think Dallas Goedert he's not Travis Kelce level, but I also don't think that he's miles below Travis Kelce. He's still a good tight end. So, but like I said, Chiefs have right now. All their wide receivers are hurt. Their top corner in L'Jarius Sneed is hurt. I'm not sure if he's playing. And I don't think Juju is the Chiefs' number 1, quote unquote. But I don't think even if all their receivers are healthy, that they really put up a fight against the Eagles secondary.
I do. I think they will because of Patrick Mahomes, and I think the biggest problem for the Eagles is you haven't played a top quarterback at all this year. And I think that is the biggest question for me going into this game. You haven't faced Allen. You haven't faced Mahomes. You haven't faced Burrow. You haven't really faced any top guys like that. The best probably quarterback you played the entire year is maybe Cousins or
Cousins was in there. We faced Trevor Lawrence, but that game was in the rain.
Yeah, so. And Trevor Lawrence at the point where you played him, correct me if I'm wrong, they were still trying to
they were still trying to figure things out.
Yeah, so you haven't played a quarterback like that at all this year, and I think that's going to be the biggest question. And obviously Andy Reid playing his former team in the Eagles, I think that's going to be another big
that's a huge storyline.
Yeah, because imagine if Andy Reid denies the Eagles their second Super Bowl.
Another big thing too is, now you say I totally agree with you. I think that Patrick Mahomes obviously is a game changer, But here's the thing with that. We were just saying how the Eagles' D line is insane. Now, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I don't think the Chiefs' offensive line is anything to scoff at. They're not terrible, but at the same time, they're not great. And the
Yeah.
Eagles are like 10 deep at D line. They
That is
rotate
true.
people in and out. They are fresh the entire game. And you also got to keep in mind, I don't care what anyone says about Mahomes. He's a great player, but a high ankle sprain takes 4 to 6 weeks to heal, and he gave it 1 week and then went out and played on it again. Like
And you
so,
could see in the second half it was starting to bother him. So that's one of the reasons I said I think the Eagles will win, is because I think your defensive line, unless like the Chiefs come up with a special offense that's very fast and a lot of no huddle, if like if the Chiefs aren't really able to do that, then I think your advantage when in terms of your rotations, your guys like that, I think that'll be the big game changer. And obviously the defensive line, they're gonna be looking at the ankle and trying to go for it.
yeah, exactly.
It's not the most honorable thing to do, but you saw in the second half of that Bengals game, he was limping on some plays and he was favoring it.
Every defensive player, I heard Quentin Michael, he said anytime a quarterback leaves the pocket or you get a shot at the quarterback, you're trying to hurt him. He's like, not it's not a bad thing. Like they're not doing it to be mean, but I mean, you take out a
Trying to
team
win.
start yeah, you take out a team starting quarterback. That's huge.
Yeah,
Look
look
at the
what happened
49ers. Like we
Yeah,
said,
look
like
what happened to the 49ers.
that's
At
a
that
number
moment, they
that's a
lost the
huge
game.
example right there. So if they can make Patrick Mahomes uncomfortable, even if it's just a slight little pinch in his ankle the entire game that makes it hard for him to run, then they're giving themselves a huge advantage going in for the rest of the game. So, like I said, don't get me wrong, Patrick Mahomes, great quarterback, but there's definitely a way that they can minimize Patrick Mahomes' productivity from going outside of the pocket and giving himself extra time, and that's going to be huge for the game. If you remember, Eagles and the Chiefs played once. They played before last year. And it was a decent game. This was before the Eagles kind of found their groove. It was early in the season, but also keep in mind in this game, the Eagles didn't have the amount of weapons that they have now. They didn't have A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith was their leading receiver. They had Miles Sanders, but this was before they started running the ball and getting that part of their offense opened up. Their secondary was nothing after Darius Slay. Their linebackers, terrible. Like, there were just so many holes in this team. And they kept it a game against the Chiefs, who were still one of the best teams in the league. It was a 42-30 final. And Patrick Mahomes, he had a decent game, 24 for 278, 5 touchdowns and 1 interception. But a big piece to their offense that they don't have this time, Tyreek Hill. He went for 11 for 186 and 3 touchdowns. And we're talking about how big of a piece that Travis Kelce is. Travis Kelce only had 4 receptions for 23 yards. So that's going to be huge. Now, obviously, with Tyreek Hill gone, Travis Kelce becomes a huge piece to that offense, even bigger than he was before, because no Tyreek means Travis Kelce is more of a focus in the offense. But with that being said, like I said, this was before they really got their run game going. Jalen Hurts, 32 completions for 387 yards and 2 touchdowns with another 47 rushing. And then Devontae Smith, 7 receptions for 122 yards. Dallas Goedert had 5 for 56 and a touchdown. Miles Sanders had a couple completions. They had a game last year, and they kept it a close game. So I think this is going to be similar to last year, where there might not be a ton of defense. And if there is, I believe it's going to be more from the Eagles side than the Chiefs side. But I think this is going to be a high-scoring game and lots of offense, and definitely a big one for people who don't usually watch the sport to want to get into the sport from this game, because it's going to be that much
I think
that exciting.
It is the makings of a good Super Bowl. My only thing I dislike about the Super Bowl is I don't like West Coast Super Bowls, because I just think in terms of aesthetic wise, it looks a lot better on the East Coast when it's actually night during the game.
Yeah.
And that goes for not only the game, but the halftime show. Everything just looks better when it's an East Coast Super Bowl. And I prefer ones that aren't in the domes, because I just like that the weather could play a factor in it. We saw it with the Colts and Bears Super Bowl years ago. It was raining, so that was a factor. So that's my only detraction from it. I understand why they put a lot of Super Bowls out west, but I just prefer it to be on the East Coast.
And I mean, you saw that with the Seahawks Broncos Super Bowl that was in New Jersey in the Giants Stadium at MetLife. I mean, yes, but also like you said, out west, I agree that it's not as aesthetically pleasing, quote unquote, because it's only going to be 4 o'clock there. It doesn't have the same feel to it. But the domes, I understand. You don't really want to. If you're in the cold, I mean, not that I guess Kansas City does get pretty cold. Actually, a Super Bowl in the cold this season would be pretty beneficial. That'd be
my dream is to see a Super Bowl in the snow. I don't think it will ever happen, but I would love to see it.
Especially with how many teams are moving to domes.
Oh yeah, like I want to see a white Super Bowl.
But that probably won't be happening ever. So but yeah, this year would be a cool Super Bowl for the cold, especially since Kansas City, for their like past 3 or 4 games, have been playing in single digit weather. Obviously Philadelphia, not exactly the warmest place on earth in the winter. So it would be a cool game to see in the cold, but
they're playing in Arizona, so forget that.
Yeah, I think it will. And hey, when it's hot, when it's warmer, that just brings on more scoring because the air floats or the ball floats a little bit more. You get a little bit more air under the ball. When it's cold, the ball is harder and it makes it harder to catch. So I see why they're doing what they're doing. I mean, like I said earlier, NFL is a business. They got to focus on also bringing in money. So I see what they're doing there. But ultimately, I think it's going to be a good game. We're going to go full predictions this time. Winner and scores. I'll let you go first. I know you said earlier you think you still sticking with the Eagles.
Yeah. I'm going to go with the Eagles 24-17.
24-17.
Yeah.
I am also going to go Eagles, as biased as it sounds. I do believe the Eagles have a better chance to win this game, but I am going to go Eagles 38, Chiefs 31. I think it's going to be a really high scoring game. Eagles right now 1.5 point favorites, but everything seems to be pointing to it just being a pretty dead center game and everything.
Yeah.
Looks like it's going to be pretty even. So definitely an interesting game for the Super Bowl. But with that kind of will close out the NFL and pretty much close it out for the season. We'll have one more week to talk about it. So definitely going to be a painful couple of months coming up here in the next week. But moving on to the NHL, again, not much really going on there because they went to the All-Star break. So we have about a week of games to talk about, and then there's nothing else to talk about after that for the most part. I'll just start out real quick with the Flyers because there was nothing much that went on there, except that Carter Hart is, in my opinion, probably the most underrated goalie in the league. First off, I believe he should have been in the All-Star game. Same with Travis Konechny. I think they both got snubbed.
Yeah, there's no reason Hayes should have gone over.
Yeah,
Konechny.
I don't think Hayes should have went. Like I said, he's been benched 2 periods in a whole game this season. I don't think he should have went at all. I think Travis Konechny definitely should have been, and Carter Hart is one of the most underrated goalies in the league. Carter Hart pitched a 40-save shutout against the Jets on last Sunday, so a week ago from today. He is 21, 3 and 5 in his career when facing 40 or 38 or more shots from the opposing team. The amount of poise and control to have to take that many pucks and not let it rattle you is absolutely insane. I mean, Carter Hart, he's definitely the bright spot of a quite gloomy team right now. Now, I'm saying that, but like I said, they just shut out the Jets, who are not a bug on the windshield. They're definitely a rough team to play against. Scheifele, Kyle Connor, Nikolai Ehlers. They got some players over there, and that was against Connor Hellebuck. Connor Hellebuck actually got pulled in the game, so they played some good hockey there. They're 6 points out of a playoff spot right now. They start back up on Monday with the Islanders, an automatic playoff game coming right off the bat. But the thing that scares me a little bit is Travis Konechny. is on a little bit of a cold streak, but when you think about it, Travis Konechny was on such a hot streak. He had only had one time where he went back-to-back games without a point. That is insane to do in the NHL. I believe that was about 48 games. No, it was actually less because he was injured. So I believe it was around 40 games where he had two games back to back that one time that he went with no points. He has now done that again. He's on a 3-game streak where he hasn't had a point. So I think what happened is he got his 24th goal, and I think it's now getting in his head because his next goal is his career high. And I think that's kind of a wall that he's hitting. And I think once he gets that, though, he's going to be back on a streak, and he's going to be back on a heater, just scoring all over the place, producing points all over the place. So I'm hoping this break kind of gives him a little bit of a break from hockey, lets him kind of clear his mind. And I think this break could actually be huge for the Flyers. They were in a little bit of a rough schedule. They had a ton of games going back and forth. There was no really time to practice. There was actually one point where John Tortorella said they weren't practicing for the rest of that point in time until the All-Star break, just because he wanted to give the team time to take a break from hockey and not have hockey on their minds. So I'm really interested to see how that they come back from this break and how it affects them. And only 6 points out of a playoff spot. These are meaningful games. These are the games that John Tortorella is looking for. When you're playing in games where you're not really playing for anything, that kind of takes away the overlook element and seeing who's going to be helpful towards the team in the future. But these are all meaningful games. They're in a playoff hunt still. I don't think they're going to trade for anyone at the deadline. They might keep James Van Riemsdyk now just because they're still in a playoff hunt. I doubt they will, but
I don't think they should, frankly.
Since I don't think they will either, but since they're they're still in the hunt, there's probably a good chance. They're 6 points out. That's 3 wins. I don't think they will, but there is definitely speculation now that that they're in the hunt. Maybe they don't trade him immediately, but like I said, they're definitely probably going to let him walk. But other than that, this is huge for the team overall. Whether they make the playoffs or not, playing in meaningful games makes the team that much better. Noah Cates, another guy who was kind of struggling at the start of the season, but as the season has gone on, he's been producing, getting a hang of the NHL more, really starting to look good for the future, and potentially a player that John Tortorella is going to want to keep. So I'm really excited to see what comes after the All-Star break and excited to see what the Flyers can do. And I'm also interested to see a little bit with the goalie situation because Felix Sandstrom has struggled a bit. Carter Hart, obviously, still an absolute monster in net, and he is just playing on a whole different level of confidence right now. But they have a little bit of a goalie situation going on with Sandstrom and Urson, so I'm really interested to see what goes on there, but nothing that we can really look at now. And coming up on the end of the season, I'm definitely excited to have a reason to watch the games a little bit more. Obviously, when your team is losing, makes it a little bit harder to watch the games, but with football coming to an end and the Flyers still being in a decent spot going to the end of their season, I'm excited to see what they can do to close out the season.
Yeah, with the Caps, we've been 4-6 in our last 10. I hope the All-Star break is a really good reset for us because coming after it, I think we're really going to need to step things up. Laviolette's going to need to really get a hold of the team, and honestly not sure if he's the guy to do that. I think they'll move on from Laviolette at the end of the season. I would like to see Boudreaux back. I think that'd be a cool story, but two things we did do. We re-signed Sonny Milano to the 3-year deal. It's like 1.9 AAV around there. Dylan Strome 5 years and a $5 million AAV. I think those are two good signings. They've been playing great this year. They're youthful, and I think we've really seen a difference in them because you've seen they're youthful. They've been playing great. But for the Caps, I'm really interested to see what they do at the trade deadline because I don't know what they're going to do because I do think there's some players we need to move on from.
like
I don't
Ovi.
know.
Gosh, what a scrub.
Yeah. No, but Eller, Mantha, you could maybe even make the case for Kuznetsov. They won't do it, but I just think even though he's leading the team in assists, he kind of reminds me of Alex Semin. I mean, they're not similar in terms of like play style because Semin was more of a goal scorer, but they just seem like when they don't care, they just seem like very lackadaisical, and it seems like they have a lot of talent, but it doesn't always that doesn't get translated onto the ice always. So yeah, I'm interested to see what they do. Because right now, like before the break, we were just unimpressive. We were just mediocre at best. We're still fourth in the Metro. Yeah, we're 2 points behind the Rangers and 3 points ahead of the Penguins. So who knows what we're gonna do?
I think that Dylan Strome signing is really
It's
interesting because just a couple weeks ago he was a healthy scratch against the Flyers.
which was that was a dumb decision. I think that was just Laviolette being incompetent. There's absolutely no reason why he should have been a healthy scratch, and Eller was playing over him. There's absolutely no reason why that should have happened.
But with that being said, at the same time, I do think that Dylan Strome has been playing well for you guys. I do feel like there's, if you guys could find a way to still get some youth and keep it, not get rid of all your old guys at once, there's an even flow of getting rid of people but still bringing in young talent. And I think that if you guys could find a way to achieve that, then you're going to be in a good spot for years. Dylan Strome is definitely a huge piece to that because he was a big signing for you guys this season.
Yeah, and our team, if we get hot, we're kind of built. We would be a very hard team to play against in the playoffs because we have the experience and we're a big team. Because you have guys like Wilson, Mantha, Ovi. We have a lot of guys who are really big and physical. Like Strome is 6'3". He's one of our best centers, and he's a very big guy. We're not afraid to throw the body. And Kemper has been playing pretty decent this year, considering some of our defensive struggles. But will that happen? No. But I do think we could set ourselves up to have some more first round losses in the future.
Hockey players make me forget about height so much. Like looking at an NFL field, you can see like running backs next to linemen, next to quarterbacks. Like you can kind of see the difference in heights, but on ice, it is so hard to see heights. So when you
because they're always moving, and they're
well,
always
not that they're always moving, but also like just with all them on skates, and it's very rare that you get a view of one standing next to another, like with not moving, not doing anything, not bending over there. It's very rare that you see that. So aside from like Zdeno Chara, I have absolutely no clue who is where. Like the goalie who played for the Lightning for a bit and then he went over to the Stars. I can't think of his name right now. Ben Bishop. But he was like 6'7".
Yeah, he's huge.
Yeah, it's weird to think about certain people at certain heights in the NHL. It just blows my mind. But yeah, that's huge that you guys got Dylan Strome back. Real quick before we talk about that other big trade, because the trade deadline is coming up March 3rd, I believe is the trade deadline. And we did see one big trade go through, but how are you feeling watching Ovi and Crosby go back and forth?
That was cool to see, and during the skills competition to see Ovi Jr. out on the ice, I did like to see that. I know Ovi, he doesn't always go to the All-Star game because the past few years actually he's been treating it as a break and he's just taking the one gamer. But I thought it was cool to see the Ovi and Crosby on the ice. There was a point in time where I hated Crosby, and part of me still does, but I have massive respect for the guy. We've played the Penguins in 4 different playoff series, and when you're two teams like that and you're both good, and you've had a lot of tough playoff series, it's hard to not respect them. So I thought that was cool to see.
That's why I asked, because I know you and I share a beloved hatred for the Penguins. And so just to see because I believe They were number 1 and 2 picks of the same year, correct?
No.
They weren't.
Ovi and Malkin were the same year. The year before
Oh.
was Fleury, and the year after, I believe, was Crosby, or the year after that.
Were Ovi and Crosby both number 1 picks?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So that's where I got confused. I didn't know if one was 1 and 2 or if they were years right next to each other in both ones.
Yeah. Ovi and Malkin were the same year.
But yeah, like I said, I know we both share the same beloved hatred for the Penguins, so I wanted to see how you felt about them. They looked like they were having a grand old time at the All-Star break. So and did you watch the All-Star game at all? Like any of the actual games? But there was one where Ovi and Crosby went back and forth for like 3 passes.
I did see that goal. That was a nice little
and they asked Ovi, they're like, you know what happened on that goal? And Ovi's explaining, and Crosby's just sitting there laughing the entire time he's explaining the play. So they look like they're secretly buddies, even though they're on rival teams.
Yeah, I think they are. Like, it's not really a secret at this point.
And that's the thing I know a lot of players like about the All-Star games is it's not very often that you get to go hang out with players from other teams and not have, hatred towards the other. Because obviously when you're on the field, you're not being buddy-buddy with anyone. So now going on to that big trade, honestly something that still involves us just a little bit because it is the Islanders, which are in the Metropolitan. And in my opinion, Islanders got owned in this trade. They got hosed. Any of the adjectives that describe them getting killed in this trade. They trade away Anthony Beauvillier, Autu Ratty. I'm not exactly sure how big of a piece he is, but also a conditional first rounder, which is if that first rounder is 12 or higher, then it gets bumped back to the next year. It's a 2023 pick, so for this year. For Bo Horvat. Now, don't get me wrong, Bo Horvat, he's a good player. He's getting paid $5.5 million this year, but the Canucks are retaining 25% of his salary. But they traded away a top line forward for them because he plays with Matt Barzal. Traded a top line forward. I saw he played 12 games this season, so I'm presuming that Auti Ratty is a kind of prospect who goes back and forth and kind of a two-way forward guy. Not a two-way forward, a two-way contract guy who goes back and forth, and they bring him up when he needs to, and maybe potentially something for the Canucks later. And then a first-rounder, and like I said, Bo Horvat, not a terrible player, but they brought him over at the deadline for all that, and then they had to re-sign him. They re-signed him for 8 years.
8 years, $65 million. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, was it $8.25 million, I guess?
Per year?
Yes, I know it was at least 8 mil AAV.
All I know is it's a very long deal, and I think it's a little too much money. I mean, he's a good player, but I'm not entirely sure.
I knew as soon as I saw they re-signed him that he was getting at least 7 mil. Just because I know the type of player Bo Horvat is. He is a good player, but he's a very, I don't want to say situational player, but he benefits more from having talent around him. So he's not a individual really good player. He is a guy who, if you put him on a line with good players, he's going to produce well. But if he's on a line where he's not with other talented players, then he's not going to do anything. And I mean, that's how the NHL works. I totally understand that. But
he's getting 8.5 AAV. That's a lot.
Yeah, I thought it was up there. So it's Islanders kind of got bamboozled in this trade a little bit, so I'm interested to see what happens. But at the same time, like I said, Bo Horvat's a player for sure, so I'm a little bit worried about him being in the division. And Flyers are going to see him on Monday, so we're going to find out pretty quickly how much of an impact he'll have for the Islanders. But other than that, like I said, trade deadline will be coming up, so we'll have probably a little bit more to talk about when that comes around. But anything else from you? Any trades you think they're gonna make that the Caps might make for a playoff run?
I said so. I really don't know. Like I want guys to leave like Eller and Mantha, but I'm not entirely. They'll probably make a deal or two here and there, but I just have no inclination as to what that's gonna be.
No positions or anything as what you think they might need?
Yeah, I don't know.
All right. Well, with that, then we are going to leave it off there. You guys can follow our Instagram and TikTok where we'll post big news, clips of the podcast, and all that over at BL in the DC on Instagram and TikTok. If you guys want to email us questions or comments to put in here, it's blinthedc@gmail.com. You guys can check out and follow our podcast on Apple, Spotify, leave a rate and review. And with that, we are going to end it off there. So we will see you guys next week.
See you later.